Hi friends, welcome back. I'm so happy to be here to read chapter 3 of Because of Winn Dixie. First, I hope everybody's rocking their West Wildcat gear today. I've got my Wildcat shirt on. Mrs. Frawley posted on her West Elementary newsletter that it's West Elementary Spirit Day. So we're rocking our gear here at the Terra Nova house. Also, I was so excited to receive some Friday letters today. Keep sending those to me. I love reading them. I received some via the Remind app. Have mom and dad send those to me. You can even post them on Google Classroom, and I can read them there and make comments also right there on the computer, and you can read what I've written and responded to you. Let's see what else. It's beautiful outside today, so we just got back from a awesome bike ride, and we are going to head out for another one right after I do this read aloud with you. My kiddos are having recess right now. We just finished lunch, so I hope you can get outside and get some fresh air too. So I'm ready to read chapter 3 and maybe even chapter 4 because I missed you all last night. I was having trouble with my recording, but it looks like I've gotten it fixed now. Sometimes that happens because I have been on my phone a lot and it's giving me some glitches. So hopefully we'll be okay from here on out. Fingers crossed. But before we get started, I do want to recap and give a little summary of Winn Dixie. And if you remember, we use our comprehension hand. So if you're at home, you can make one just like we did in class, but it's real easy to just use your hand and give yourself a comprehension check. I always like to do it before the book and after reading a couple chapters in your own books. So if you remember, we have who, what, when, where, why, and how. So just to summarize, we have our main characters, Opal, Winn Dixie, and the preacher. What's happening? We have Opal who found Winn Dixie in the grocery store, and she brought him home to the preacher, and the preacher welcomed him into their house. When, during the day, where we have two settings, they were in the grocery store, and now they're at Opal and the preacher's home in the trailer park. And why is this all happening? We ask those questions while we're reading, and we could probably say this is all happening because maybe Opal is lonely. We could ask that question. We could say because she found Winn Dixie and he was lonely and astray and needed a home. Those are questions we're going to ask throughout the story. And how did this all happen? She found Winn Dixie in the store, and it was part of the problem because he was astray, and she brought him home. And we're going to have to get to the bottom of how Winn Dixie became astray. Maybe we'll get to the bottom of that. These two, why and how, are always ongoing as we read a story, any story. So let's keep going on to chapter 3. Chapter 3. I started in on Winn Dixie right away. Oh, I forgot to tell you really quick. I'm sorry. There is a copy of Winn Dixie posted on Google Classroom, a whole copy of every chapter. So if you don't have a copy of the book at home, you can log on to Google Classroom and follow right along with me. Okay? Sorry. I started in on Winn Dixie right away, trying to clean him up. First, I gave him a bath. I used the garden hose and some baby shampoo. He stood still for it, but I could tell he didn't like it. He looked insulted, and the whole time he didn't show me his teeth or wag his tail once. After he was all washed and dried, I brushed him good. I used my own hairbrush and worked real hard at all the knots and patches of fur that were stuck together. He didn't mind being brushed, He wiggled his back like it felt pretty good. The whole time I was working on him, I was talking to him, and he listened. I told him how we were alike. See, I said, you don't have any family, and neither do I. I've got the preacher, of course, but I don't have a mama. I mean, I have one, but I don't know where she is. She left when I was 3 years old. I can't hardly remember her, and I bet you don't remember your mama much either. So we're almost like orphans. Winn-Dixie looked straight at me when I said that to him, like he was feeling relieved to finally have somebody understand his situation. I nodded my head at him and went on talking. I don't even have any friends because I had to leave them all behind when we moved here from Whatley. Whatley's up in North Florida. Have you ever been to North Florida? Winn-Dixie looked down at the ground, like he was trying to remember if he had. You know what, I said? Ever since we moved here, I've been thinking about my mama extra hard, more than I ever did when I was in Whatley. Winn-Dixie twitched his ears and raised his eyebrows. I think the preacher thinks about my mama all the time, too. He's still in love with her. I know that because I heard the ladies at the church in Whatley talking about him. They said he's still hoping she'll come back. But he doesn't tell me that. He won't talk to me about her at all. I want to know more about her, but I'm afraid to ask the preacher. I'm afraid he'll get mad at me. Winn-Dixie looked at me hard, like he was trying to say something. What? I said. He stared at me. You think I should make the preacher tell me about her? Winn-Dixie looked at me so hard, he sneezed. I'll think about it, I said. When I was done working on him, Winn-Dixie looked a whole lot better. He still had his bald spots, but the fur that he did have cleaned up nice. It was all shiny and soft. You could still see his ribs. But I intended to feed him good, and that would take care of that. I couldn't do anything about his crooked yellow teeth, but because he got into a sneezing fit every time I started brushing them with my toothbrush, and I finally had to give up. But for the most part, he looked a whole lot better, and so I took him into the trailer and showed him to the preacher. Daddy, I said. He said. He was working on a sermon and kind of muttering to himself. Daddy, I wanted to show you the new Winn-Dixie. The preacher put down his pencil and rubbed his nose, and finally he looked up. Well, he said, smiling real big at Winn-Dixie. Well now, don't you look handsome? Winn-Dixie smiled back at the preacher. He went over and put his head in the preacher's lap. He smells nice too, said the preacher. He rubbed Winn-Dixie's head and looked into his eyes. Daddy, I said, real quick before I lost all my nerve, I've been talking to Winn-Dixie. Is that right? The preacher said. He scratched Winn-Dixie's head. I've been talking to him, and he agreed with me that since I'm 10 years old, you should tell me 10 things about my mama. Just 10 things, that's all. The preacher stopped rubbing Winn-Dixie's head and held real still. I could see him thinking about pulling his head back into his shell. One thing for each year I've been alive, I told him. Please. Winn-Dixie looked up at the preacher and kind of gave him a nudge with his nose. The preacher sighed. He said to Winn-Dixie, I should have guessed you were going to be trouble. Then he looked at me. Come on, Opal, he said. Sit down, and I will tell you 10 things about your mama. Chapter 4. Because I missed you guys last night. 1, said the preacher. We were sitting on the couch, and Winn-Dixie was sitting between us. Winn-Dixie had already decided that he liked the couch a lot. 1, said the preacher again. Winn-Dixie looked at him kind of hard. Your mama was funny. She could make just about anybody laugh. 2, he said. She had red hair and freckles. Just like me, I said. Just like you, the preacher nodded. 3, she liked to plant things. She had a talent for it. She could stick a tire in the ground and grow a car. Winn-Dixie started chewing on his paw, and I tapped him on the head to make him stop. 4, said the preacher. She could run fast. If you were racing her, you couldn't ever let her get a head start, because she would beat you for sure. I'm that way too, I said. Back home in Watley, I raced Liam Fulterton and beat him, and he said it wasn't fair, because boys and girls shouldn't race each other to begin with. I told him he was just a sore loser. The preacher nodded. He was quiet for a minute. I'm ready for number 5, I told him. 5, he said. She couldn't cook. She burned everything, including water. She had a hard time opening a can of beans. She couldn't make head nor tail of a piece of meat. 6, the preacher rubbed his nose and looked up at the ceiling. Winn-Dixie looked up too. Number 6 is that your mama loved a story. She would sit and listen to stories all day long. She loved to be told a story. She especially liked funny ones, stories that made her laugh. The preacher nodded his head like he was agreeing with himself. Number 7, I asked. Let's see, he said. She knew all the constellations, every planet in the nighttime sky, every last one of them. She could name them and point them out, and she never got tired of looking up at them. Number 8, said the preacher, with his eyes closed, was that she hated being a preacher's wife. She said she couldn't stand having the ladies at church judge what she was wearing and what she was cooking and how she was singing. She said it made her feel like a bug under a microscope. Winn-Dixie lay down on the couch. He put his nose in the preacher's lap and his tail in mine. 10, said the preacher. 9, I told him. 9, said the preacher. She drank. She drank beer and whiskey and wine. Sometimes she couldn't stop drinking, and that made me and your mama fight quite a bit. Number 10, he said with a long sigh. Number 10 is that your mama loved you. She loved you very much. But she left me, I told him. She left us, said the preacher softly. I could see him pulling his old turtle head back into his stupid turtle shell. She packed her bags and left us, and she didn't leave one thing behind. Okay, I said. I got up off the couch. Winn-Dixie hopped off too. Thank you for telling me, I said. I went right back to my room and wrote down all 10 things that the preacher had told me. I wrote them down just the way he said them to me so that I wouldn't forget them. And then I read them out loud to Winn-Dixie until I had them memorized. I wanted to know those 10 things inside and out. That way, if my mama ever came back, I could recognize her, and I would be able to grab her and hold onto her tight and not let her go away from me again. Chapter 5 is next, and I encourage you now to get outside maybe, get some fresh air, think about the story, and maybe get lost in a book yourself later on. Don't forget to use your comprehension hand. Who, what, when, where, why, how. Think about those questions. Remember your characters, what's happening, where the setting is, why things are happening, when they're happening. And boys and girls, we'll recap tomorrow or Monday whenever I get a chance to post it. And we'll summarize what we've read so far. And I hope you're enjoying it. And I miss you all very, very much. Keep your Friday letters coming. Keep checking out Google Classroom. And I will see you soon. Bye.